Howdy, folks. My name is Lee. I am with Follow the Leader, where I upload experiences, knowledge, and information that I have learned to pass it on to the digital sphere in hopes that anyone that this resonates with will head over to my website, download the lecture, the marketing graphics, and the script essentially to give that lecture to your local communities. This is a hybrid of digital and grassroots activism. And today I want to talk about my experience at the border of Arizona and Mexico. This is called On the Border of Faith and Hell, a week along America's southern border. So in October of 2024, 9 seminarians and their professor spent a week with Borderlinks, a Tucson-based nonprofit that hosts groups for the purpose of immigration and border-related education. Immigration, as we all know, is a very complex and emotional topic, and this program gave us an opportunity to be immersed in the layers of local, state, national, and international politics that convolute any straightforward approach. The purpose of this presentation is to share the information that we learned and shed light to the complexity of immigration. Today, I hope that when you walk away from this information, that you have a better grasp on the local, state, national, and international politics that impact immigration. You understand the existing issues within our current immigration system, and that you have a better idea of the real life stories of people crossing or living at the border of Mexico and Arizona. We'll talk about the global politics and economics. We will cover American immigration policy history. I'm actually going to save that bit of the slideshow timeline to the end because it is rather long. And so please, if you are viewing on YouTube, just make sure that you pause because I'll just show there's about 5 slides dedicated to the timeline of American immigration policy. So stay tuned towards the end for the timeline. We'll get into NAFTA. We'll talk about 9/11 and the Real ID Act. We'll talk about the environmental destruction going on at the border. We'll talk about China's influence, right? America is a superpower, but so is China. China definitely has a role to play in all of this. And then finally, we'll talk about the wall. In our second bit, we'll talk about the current system, the immigration crime, the welfare resourcing, the immigration process. We'll talk about corporate private detainment centers, and we will speak on the reality of the cost of mass deportation to the American taxpayer. Then we'll wrap up with stories from the border. We'll hear from Border Patrol, Americans that live along the border, migrant farmers, asylum seekers. We'll hear from environmentalists like the Sierra Club. We will hear from the indigenous people that are affected, the Tohono O'odham Reservation. And finally, we'll end with the Desert Walk, where we dropped humanitarian aid to a humanitarian drop site on the American side that is actively being used by desert crossing migrants. Again, at the end, I will have that timeline. And again, that timeline is dense. And so we'll save that to the end so we don't go too heavy right at the beginning. Before we get into it, here are my sources used. The Customs and Border Enforcement, American Immigration Council, Pew Research, Department of Labor, Center for American Immigration Studies, Texas Department of Public Safety, Reuters, Cato Libertarian Think Tank, Arizona State University, Sierra Club, the humanitarian organization No More Deaths, and the books A Line Becomes a River, Globalization at What Cost, and we'll be using Bridge, where we got our immigration timeline stats. Furthermore, there is a book, I forgot to add it, but it's called The Right to Stay Home. It is how U.S. policy drives Mexican migration. Again, we have all these different books. Again, these are all on my Amazon storefront on the book list. You can scan the QR code to the right to go through and read up on the books that I've read, as well as continue to explore information for your own sake. So, America does not exist in a vacuum, and neither do our problems. Everything that we do as a global superpower not only benefits us, but hurts us. And obviously, it hurts and helps those around the world as well. But it is important to realize that in America's quest for power, we also have negative side effects that impact us as Americans. So let's take a look at those layers of interconnectedness and see how that exacerbates the immigration issue and controversies here. For one, again, that we have a long history with immigration. I saved that timeline to the end, but from the very beginning, as soon as settlers got here and claimed their territory, they immediately started to decide who else can come. This has always been a controversial part of American history. Immigration will probably always be. But here in modern day history, I'm going to start in with NAFTA, which was developed in 1994. Now, that is the North American Free Trade Agreement. It's signed by Mexico, the United States, and Canada to facilitate the trading of goods and specifically subsidize fruits and vegetables between the three nations. It would allow for free trade. We talk about tariffs a lot. If we import, we charge tariffs to, well, the idea is that the NAFTA replaced the tariffs so that we could have free trade and not have tariffs when we import from Canada and Mexico. Of course, tariffs come from the consumer pays that. It's not that Mexico or Canada are going to pay those tariffs. That comes from us uh, purchasing goods that are not American made. Now, the US subsidizes corn and other crops that we grow. In fact, if the United States government did not subsidize our farmers would be hurting bad. Um, this results in lower sale prices and makes it extremely difficult for Canadian and Mexican farmers to grow crops that and be sold competitively with the United States. This means that if you are, say, a corn farmer in Mexico, you will arguably you will lose your farm because you simply cannot sell your crops at the low rate that the American farmers can because the American farmers are getting subsidies from the government. This led to mass migration almost within a year of NAFTA being signed. Some folks have asked why do governments do this? It is very common for national governments to subsidize their own agriculture. Now, Mexico and Canada had to sign NAFTA. In fact, that's allows the free trade, as I spoke again. And Europe was already doing this. So if North America did not do this, we would fall behind. Again, all that globalization, all that process, there's not just like one bill or one act, but we are in a whole interconnected system. Some may have asked, why would any Mexican government sign this? First of all, highly corrupt politicians abroad, not saying that the United States does not have our fair share of sketchy folks, but particularly when we are as powerful as we are, we tend to be able to call the shots for other people's economic policies. And if we can work with someone who doesn't mind collecting a lot of cash or screwing over their nation because they have something selfish to gain, well, then all the better for us. Corn specifically, I keep coming back to corn. Corn's not the only crop that is being grown in Mexico. Corn is not only used for our consumption, but it is also used to feed a lot of agriculture in America. And so it's a massive market, whether you, the person, eat corn or not. It is a big form of feed for hog and pig. And I know that they do sometimes with cattle, but it's real starchy. We can go into corn as a source of nutrition, but it will fatten, it will grow the livestock, even if it's not like the most nutritious of them out there. And then finally, we have corn used in ethanol. I don't know if y'all remember back a few years ago, everyone was all wild about corn being used as fuel. But American farmers, specifically with corn, getting a heck of a subsidy, which again lowers the price for American corn and makes it so that other folks in other countries simply cannot compete. Um, NAFTA also went forward and canceled other parts of the Mexican Constitution, which protects indigenous communal landholdings from sale and privatization. Basically, we're going to do this NAFTA, and um, people that are in Mexico, particularly indigenous folk, will not be able to lay claim to a lot of their lands, and it will be privatized. The Zapatistas, they are mostly indigenous farm workers in the Chiapas. They have been the most outspoken. They are located in Mexico, and they have been probably the most outspoken, calling NAFTA a death sentence for indigenous Mexican communities and the end of rural farmers in Mexico. And in January 1st, 1994, the Zapatistas actually did declare war against the Mexican state. So again, we talk about how corrupt leaders at the top that are probably pocketing quite a pretty penny from this in other ways, how they are not looking out for uh, their own people, and their own people are turning on them, particularly when they are losing their land and their income, and they're being forced to come and work up in America because that's where the work and labor is. So 9/11, one of the darkest days in Americans' modern history. September 11th, 2001, we were devastated by terrorist attacks. In response to those attacks, the president and Congress had got approved for spending and budget and action and acts that were pretty much prior to that. I wouldn't say necessarily unheard of, but it flung us into a state of war and rally around the flag and just getting budget and acts passed that would give the American government quite a bit of power and quite a lot of spending power. One of these is the Real ID Act. There was a lot more money that went towards Border Patrol and any of our border conflicts, issues, and essentially 9/11 and the Real ID Act fostered a whole new wave of money and government power on what they can do in regards to national security, including the Real ID Act. The Real ID Act made identification stronger for folks to essentially be checked by government and security agents. Some people celebrate having stronger identification. Others see it as a form of racism. They see it as a form of exclusion. And there are lots of controversial debates about identification, congressional spending, and presidential acts in regards to national security in light of 9/11. We are so blessed to live in the United States, but our superpower, our dominance, um, because of the environmental crises that a lot of our mining and manufacturing creates, in America, we either unionize, we protest, we get together to fight these so that our American lands do not become corrupted by any of the manufacturing and corporate mess, essentially, that comes. And we tend to kick it to other countries with lower environmental regulations. One such is lithium mining. Now, lithium is used in electric vehicles, it's used in phones. Lithium batteries are extremely popular, very commonly used. And in order to get that lithium, you have to mine, which is a high contaminant to water sources, not only for potable drinking water, but for farming and agriculture. So, people in Bolivia, Argentina, and Chile are seeing literally different colored rivers and lakes because of mining contamination for lithium for a lot of our own American needs. Furthermore, we have deforestation in Brazil. We talk about, the Amazon rainforest has been a very much a common or popular rallying cry for environmentalists um, that is still going on. Um, and again, when these communities are losing access to clean water, either for drinking, for cooking, or for farming, they have to move elsewhere. So we are looking at environmental destruction caused migration. And then, of course, there's commercial activity with little or environmental and labor protections. Again, um, this all forces mass migrations to America because we have better standards. We have higher federal regulations for how we treat our own environment and how we treat our laborers. And for folks who are being destroyed by our own companies, that's a real it's a real solution. Is, well, if America's going to come up and do this to us, like, we might as well go to America where they have better standards for their people. China. So China is also a major player, right? It's not just that America is the bad guy here. China's doing the same thing. And they have mass production in China. This has undermined small businesses and had negative environmental effects around the world. Meaning, like, if you go into a souvenir shop, you could be in Mexico, you could be in Sweden. The odds of those products saying made in China are very high. I know this because I just backpacked Europe and then I just was down in Mexico. I do a lot of international travel, and I make it a point to find handmade goods from the locals. That's what I want, something from there. I'm not looking to go there and get something that was produced in a Chinese factory. And of course, in order for China to make all of this so cheap and mass produce it, they have to ship it. Again, so you're taking away that handmade artisan, you're putting it all in the hands of China to make everything, and then they've got to travel the entire world to, again, deliver their products. Furthermore, um, the United States does not, and Great Britain, and a lot of what we consider the West, in the last few decades, and we can go into a different lecture on this, but particularly following World War II and trying to stimulate the global economy, Western countries gave out a lot of loans to third world countries. It could be African nations, Central American, South American nations. They do have adjustable interest rates, and there are some nations, I want to say it's Nicaragua, that's 25% of their GDP is going back to the United States to repay those loans. So what we've done is got them in a financial stronghold. What China has done to combat that is essentially gone in and built their infrastructure, saying, I know 25, let's say in Nicaragua, let's say China goes into Nicaragua and says, hey, I know that 25% of your country's budget is just going back to the United States. You can't do anything when a quarter of your budget is going back to a global superpower. What we'll do is we'll build highways, schools, roads, hospitals, um, and really, yes, they do take money, but really this is about Chinese loyalty. So again, America gave, and other countries gave loans to other nations, and they did so at a rate that they can't pay back. That's keeping them poor. And China said, "Well, hey, like, here we have plenty of money. We'll go back in and we'll do this for you. But when it comes time, remember who did this for you." So here we have the wall. Now this stretches from Tijuana, California, across all buildable lands to El Paso, Texas, and then there's the Rio Grande. And the Rio Grande takes up a good chunk of what could be done on the wall because, again, one side of the Rio Grande is American. So if you are an American and you want to go fishing, if you want to rafting, if you want to recreate on the Rio Grande and you have safe access to it, as an American, we believe that we should. And then it picks up again in the southern Rio Grande Valley in Texas. I believe that there are 699 miles of land border and about 1,200 miles of river Rio Grande border. Now, the wall is not all built the same. Parts of the wall are wooden Normandy barriers, just those X's, those wood. For those listening, it's probably hard to see, but very basic, just like X post barriers. And there are other parts that are 25 feet tall with sharp edged metal structures with razor wire and see through slots for Border Patrol. Again, the wall that has been built, the modern, the new, and improved wall that we have been most discussing in our news, is actually slotted with metal post slotting and chicken and razor wire behind it, but it's so that Border Patrol can see through. In the Rio Grande, on the river side of it, Texas has invested over $1 million so far in putting these floating barriers, and they're these razor edged balls with underwater netting. They are planted, they have a foundation that goes underneath the water and plugs in, deep, and is dug deep into the riverbed, so that even if you wanted to swim under it, you would be unable to. There's underwater netting, these floating barriers. They're not really floating, they just appear as so. But again, if you get close to it, you try to grab any of these balls, they are razor edged. And then if you try to go under it, there's a net. Of course, this does cause environmental issues for fish literally not being able to float and swim in their own river. It essentially divides the river in half. It has not stopped immigration. In fact, most folks that are coming to the United States aren't crossing at this border. They're coming in through our airports. They're mainly coming in through our airports and overstaying their visas. So for those who are crossing at the border, the folks who are predominantly very poor. Um, um, it has increased the violence of it. In fact, a lot of these walls force people to go all like way out into the desert, walking as many as 10 to 15 days in the middle of the desert. Again, these are some poor people coming from Mexico, but also Central and South America. They have walked and traveled a long way. A wall is not what's going to be the deterrent. But again, they will probably die out in the desert. Or, because I said earlier, the wall is metal, there are folks that just bring welding materials and will just cut and walk through. You can build ladders. There's all sorts of structures. Desperation knows no bounds. So folks are still getting over the wall. It hasn't been the deterrent that it was promised to be. And really, it increases the power of cartels and coyote guides to get folks across. Now, a note about cartels: there are tunnels that the cartels have worked through. Also, if you do work with the cartel to cross the border, it is likely that they will also ask you to smuggle drugs or firearms or anything else. So, if you are a mother and child, you are now a drug mule. If you hire a coyote guide, they may be part of the cartel. They may just be, some other renegade force. Um, it is very common that they give folks a price. Say, I will ferry you the 10, 15-day trip. It will cost X amount. And so maybe you go back, you save up for a year for $5,000. Let's call it $5,000. And they tell you it's $5,000, so you go out and maybe you save up $10,000, so that once you get across, you have starter money. And what they will do is midway through your trip is essentially exploit you for the rest of the money. Like, I know you have extra money. It's give me everything you have, or I will leave you right here. So, furthermore, coyote guides are notorious for sexually assaulting the women that they are ferrying over. I call it ferry, but guiding is really there's no ferry boat. It's just walking. So The desert, again, 10, 15 days. This is not something that has maps. This is not something that is easy to just go out and do on your own. Very much need a guide, and the guides are very quick to exploit, again, these extremely poor people, probably leaving something horrible. Lots of exploitation for people in the desert crossing world. Now, we did have a chance to talk to Border Patrol, and Border Patrol is different perspectives, of course. Like, I want to say, like, in our country, there's 40 to 80,000 Border Patrol, but that's across the country. You know, that's also up in New England, that's also in Florida, that's also um, down here, in the southern states. Um, some don't mind at all. Some say it helps. Some say it should have been really more of a go big or go home, and kind of more like the Great Wall of China, that the current wall that we have is not adequate. Like, if they were to build some sort of giant fortress where the Border Patrol could walk across it, where there was intent and more increased funding that went to the wall, maybe that could be better. Whereas some just say, you know what, it's modern day. Why are we not using drones and heat sensors and all sorts of modern day technology for this? Um, this is just woefully inadequate. So some folks appreciate it, some folks are for it. Some folks say, like, no, this is like giving me a knife to a gunfight. And some people just wish that we had used increased security. Now, we do have security cameras throughout the wall. I can't remember how many so feet or however many so yards, but we do have security cameras. They were the same company that was contracted to do the security cameras in Gaza. So we're seeing a lot of financial contractors there, military contractors, taking advantage of both the wall in along Mexico and over in the Middle East. So that's a bit about the wall. Here are some photos of the wall. Again, you see these slots. You can see through it. You can see the chicken wire. You can see the razor wire. You see at the very top how sharp that is. So even if you were to get up top, your hands would bleed. Here's some of the wooden Normandy barriers I was talking about in the last slide. And then you see the razor edge sharp floating barriers of the Rio Grande border. Right directly in the middle of this slide, you see how the wall is being constructed. You see how much space. It's not that you go up and build a wall like right where it is, but you have roads that are in front of it that you have to carve out. You have an enforcement zone. You have a levee for flooding. There's concrete, and then there's the concrete foundation, and then you have your 18 to 30-foot pedestrian barrier, followed by lots of lights and security cameras. Now, the lights we'll get into in a little bit because it is an environmental issue for nocturnal animals. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. But as you can see, the wall itself is not just a wall, but it takes up quite a bit of land surrounding it all along the border. Again, roughly 700 miles of physical border. Now, the wall is not built in mountainous areas in the desert. It is not built in wash areas. For those who are familiar with desert and flooding, during that monsoon season, a lot of rain, it'll flood and wash things out. Those are called washes. They are not built there. So in areas where like it is extremely hard to build a wall, there is not a wall. But pretty much anywhere that you can build a wall, they've built it. So a lot of folks, again, this is not just a conservative or a white right-wing issue, but is also 25% of Democrats also claim, I'm good with immigration. I just wish they could do it legally. Now, our current system makes that extremely hard. We'll find out why the laws have become stricter and stricter and stricter. over the last few decades, and we'll talk about who is pushing for stricter policies, who's bankrolling these, and kind of what's going on there. So currently, there are 11 million people here in America, undocumented. 1 million of those people will apply for citizenship, so less than 10%. And then they will accept 875,000 of them. So that is the cap. 1 million people typically apply. 875,000 will be accepted. That does not mean, and basically that number comes from so many people applying and then just giving up. Because ours is capped at 875,000 accepted annually. It is a lottery system. And like I said, you could have 5 million apply and it will not change the number capped. So people just quit applying. It is a lottery system. It's picked once annually. It is expensive. It is highly, highly suggested that you work with a immigration lawyer in order to do this, and you could have a perfect application. You could be just a rock star. And again, it's a lottery system. It's picked on one day of the year, and you're not going to make it because you're up against other people. The unauthorized or undocumented population, again, this is not just from Mexico, but 80% of the undocumented people that are here have been here for over a decade. They've already been working here. They've been a part of our society. They are paying taxes. They represent 5% of U.S. labor. 60% of these undocumented immigrants are from Mexico. Nearly 50% of adult undocumented or unauthorized immigrants live in households with children under the age of 18. So almost 50% of people who are here without papers are parents or caretakers of children. And if those children were born here, then they are now obviously born on American soil. Folks, illegal immigrants, undocumented, unauthorized. The word illegal is not particularly well embraced by advocates of immigration reform. They typically like to say unauthorized or undocumented. Regardless of whatever vernacular you want to use, undocumented immigrants make up 30% of the construction labor force and 14% of our healthcare. Which, if you look around, we are struggling to get things built as it is. Things are so expensive, and a lot of these folks are not being paid fairly. So how are we to continue on with a lot of our issues when 30% are actually taking a pay cut or a benefit cut compared to the American workforce that would be taking those roles? About 54% of households headed by immigrants do use one or more major welfare program. This is higher than American households, but not by much. US-born households are sitting right at 40% on welfare, which is its own discussion that US-born Americans, 40% are accepting government aid in some way. 59 as I said earlier, there's at least, again, the numbers kind of change. It's anywhere between 54 to 59% use one major program. Has not been sufficient evidence of fraud. Furthermore, as I mentioned earlier with taxes, yes, they are using welfare, but undocumented immigrant households paid $46.8 billion in federal taxes and $29.3 billion in state and local taxes. So just in taxes alone, going to the grocery store, getting gas, if they own property, they're paying property taxes. They do have a TIN, which is a type of tax marker. It's a type of I don't want to say citizenship, but it's very much like a social security. It's sort of like that. They do have their own number. Um, it is not social security, but they do pay taxes. And again, you're sitting at right 47 and 30, so about 77 billion in federal, state, and local taxes. Furthermore, undocumented immigrants also contribute to 22.6 billion to Social Security and 5.7 billion to Medicare. I did hear that is being very conservative and low. I did recently read that they were contributing up to 95 billion in Social Security. And again, they will not see that Social Security. Furthermore, I did talk to someone who works in health insurance the other day, and while a lot of Americans do not uh, buy and use health insurance, many undocumented immigrants do, but they pay almost double than what Americans will. So they are paying taxes, they are buying health insurance. They just are doing so at a higher rate and not seeing any of that money in return. It's all going back into Americans' pockets or corporations' pockets, however you want to call it. Something like 60% of foreign drugs arrive in cargo ships, in storage containers, in the water. So, any of our ports, it could be San Diego, it could be Miami, it could be New York, it could be, anywhere that we have ports that get cargo ships, 60% of drugs are being ferried in that way. 30% of drugs arrive in vehicles that pass through Border Patrol and pass through legal points of entry, meaning 30% of foreign drugs to America are going right under the noses of our own security people. It's not being done through the desert. Yes, there are tunnels. And yes, there is, like I said, the drug muling. But that is not the highest or number one or main way of getting illegal drugs into our border by a landslide. Really, they're just showing up right at our ports or driving through right through Border Patrol and checkpoints. Most people here also arrive through airports and they do so on visa, and then they just overstay their visa. They overstay their visa. The undocumented are actually statistically less likely to commit crimes than the US born. They're also, while they do pay for health insurance, particularly those who are working dangerous jobs in some of our oil or meat producing, meat packaging, um, any of these kind of more dangerous jobs, they will buy health insurance because, again, they're not getting workers' comp, they're not getting any benefits from these companies they're working for. And most folks are not they're not going to the doctor's office. They're trying to stay off grid. So, yes, they might have health insurance for, their own family's, care, but they are not trying to make themselves known. Furthermore, the crimes committed by the undocumented immigrants are lower than that of US born. They have a lower incarceration rate, and this again is not just in the last few decades and not just true in one area, but this is true for national, state, county, and neighborhood levels, tracing back to 150 years. So, for the last 150 years, at every single level, undocumented immigrants are committing less crimes. This is a chart to further, this is from Arizona State University. They are one of the schools very much focused on immigration policy and immigration research. Again, this is Arizona. This is their neck of the woods. I was in Arizona. That's why I'm pulling from a lot of Arizona data. As you can see, the numbers are extremely similar between Americans and undocumented. We have charge and arrest history, we have drug use, and we have gang membership. Um, so you can take a look at that. We have visas. We have different types of visas. So when you hear the word visa, know that there's all sorts of different types depending on what your purpose for being in America is. You have a temporary visa. You can start with that. That's typically for work, school, asylum, or travel. It has a time limit and very limited freedoms. You do need a visa prior to green card. And if you want to go home, back to your home country, that is dependent on your type of visa. That cost is typically $185. Oh, excuse me. Oh, man. Um, and again, that is how most folks who are undocumented are getting here and staying here is through their visa that they did not or could not renew for whatever reason. Maybe it's finances, maybe they just didn't want to, maybe et cetera, et cetera. You have B1 or B2 visas. These are typically valid for 10 years. But yeah, you have your B1 and B2 visas. You have your F1 student visa. They're valid for the duration of the student's program. And you have your H1B work visa that is valid as long as you were employed by that company. Next is your green card. It is called a green card because it is a green card. In 2024, 34.7 million people applied for green cards. That is almost triple than what it was from 1996. Furthermore, it's a massive jump. You see that there's probably a million people applying for citizenship, where you have 34.7 million applying for the green card. Now, that's either because they do not want to be American citizens, they just want to be here legally and to have the document. There's a whole lot, maybe it's easier. There's a lot of reasons why people go for the green card instead of going all the way into citizenship, which I thought was interesting. It is valid for 10 years. There's no renewal limit. You can, as soon as your 10 years is up, you can reapply. You can only apply for citizenship if you have this green card. So you need the green card in order to become a citizen. You can also serve in our nation's military. That will give you citizenship. That has been that's been a very common path to citizenship in American history. The U.S. government said it will approve 1.1 million green cards, meaning that 3 out of every 100 people will be approved for a green card. So again, pretty significant. Everyone else will have to keep waiting or be denied. Now, there are family-based green cards. This is applicable to immediate relatives, such as spouses and parents and unmarried children under 21 years of age. The processing time for this can be anywhere from 10 months to 10 years, depending on the relationship and country of origin. Your employment-based green cards can process up from 1 year to 6 years. Your company does pay for that. And this is to get, specialized skills. Again, it can be anywhere from 1 to 6 years. And then as soon as you are fired or no longer with that company, that green card no longer is valid. And then we talk about marriage-based green cards. Processing times take anywhere from 10 to 13 months. If the spouse is a U.S. citizen and they're trying to bring their new spouse over into citizenship from abroad, but if they are a green card or a permanent resident, that green card means you're a permanent resident, you could have a wait time of up to 2 years. So if you're a citizen, it'll take you around a year. If you're a green card holder, it will take you up to 2 years. And that's about how that rolls. 4 steps to naturalization. This is if you want to become a citizen here. You must establish eligibility, be 18 years old, have a green card for at least 5 years, and be able to read, write, and speak basic English. You have an application that, it's your personal information, your immigration history, a moral character assessment. Go through background checks like fingerprinted and by a photograph for the FBI. You will take a U.S. history and government test. You will have interviews, you'll take the oath of allegiance, and you will attend your naturalization ceremony after you pledge to support the Constitution and, of course, do our oaths. Only certain immigrants are eligible. They have to have held a green card, like I said, for 3 to 5 years and been permanent residents, or meet various military service requirements. The cost is $750. Now, I also want to point out that this is natural, as this is what I was talking about when 1 million people will apply, or however many people will apply to become citizens. That number will not be accepted, and you could be the perfect candidate. Another thing is, because all of this takes so much time, if any of your family information changes from the time you apply to the time you're naturalized, they can toss out your application and you start all over again. So let's say you're 22 years old, you want to become an American, you've been here in school for, you got here at 18, 4 years, okay, so 5 years. So let's say you've been here and you're trying to become a citizen. But if you get married, if you have a child, or you have to take care of your parents, your elderly parents, that changes your family relationship information, and that application has therefore been changed and will need to be renewed. Meaning the waiting time will also need to be renewed. So again, you get your visa, and then when your visa nears expiration, you apply for a green card. That can take anywhere from 1 to 6 years for green card approval, depending on country of origin. Then you have to wait another 3 to 5 years to apply for citizenship. And if any forms are completed incorrectly or your family situation changes, you will have to reapply and start over your wait period for that specific goal. So if you're looking, even if you are the most perfect candidate, you could, depending on time and country of origin and other factors, you could be waiting up to 25 years for naturalization and citizenship. Now, what happens when you do get detained and arrested for violating our immigration laws here? So, a lot of this has been urged by the Corrections Corporations of America. They are the primary private contractor. They build and facilitate our private prisons and our immigration detainment centers. So, if you are familiar, or if you've heard anything about some of our prison labor or our prison conditions, odds are since 1983, it's the CCA, Corrections Corporations of America. They currently can hold 45,000 people a day. That's what our federal detainment centers can do. Now, the CCA has become a private contractor with our government, and they've gone ahead and built something like 120 to 150,000 beds and facilities across the country. They make $161 a day per bed, filled or not, up to 60% of available space. So meaning, like I said, the facilities hold somewhere between 120 to 150,000. If any of those facilities are empty, they're still going to get paid $161 a day per bed, up to 60% of filled space. Now, that is just the money side of who is making money off all these detainment centers, who is funding or bankrolling campaign folk to pass legislature to make immigration process a stricter process, and who will get money from all of that? Well, it's the CCAs. If the mother is illegal, but the children are not, the courts will detain the mother and send the children into foster system. If the mother does not provide paperwork within 6 months, it is lawful for the American government to adopt the children out, and the mother sent to Mexico, whether she's from Mexico or not. She could be from El Salvador, have nothing to do with Mexico, and ICE comes in the middle of the night, arrests her, takes her away from her kids. Her kids get put in foster system, and if she can't provide all the paperwork, Within 6 months, she loses her kids and then she gets sent to a country that she's not even from. In fact, that's what's going to happen with any of the people that get mass deported. We do not send them back to their home countries, we just drop them in Mexico. So it's something to consider when we think about mass deportation and mass deporting 11 million people is the American states and folks that live in those American states getting 11 million people. Now, abuse and sexual assault is rampant within our detainment centers with little care for detainees' medical needs. Again, that's taxpayer dollars that's paying for food, water, and medical while folks are detained. There are reports of abusive conditions, dehumanizing conditions, not not good. Now, some people can wait in a detainment center for months, even years, awaiting legal processing. Not even the process, but it might take them months to a year to multiple years to even be able to get in front of a lawyer. So, um, we go back to that 6 months of requirement of that mother needing 6 months to get her paperwork together. What do you do if she can't even see a lawyer for 2 years? Like, um, so really, really unethical stuff going on within our detainment centers. What about the costs? Mass deportation is not only a conservative or right wing talking point, but 25%, according to Reuters and AP News, 25% of Democrats agree with mass deportation too. So let's kind of go into the money side of that, right? It sounds good that if you're not here, round them up, kick them home. But you got to have money to do that. How much money? So you got about 11 million people that if we were to do this, even just a one-time deportation, you got to deport 11 million people. There is an estimated total at conservative, at the lowest, at 315 billion. And other sources say no, by the time you get all this going, it's going to cost almost a trillion. So anywhere between 315 billion to almost a trillion taxpayer dollars will go into rounding up 11 million people. Now, how does that work? You would need to build 1,000 courtrooms and staff 1,000 courtrooms to handle the due process of 11 million people. You would need to staff. Again, you need to build it. This is all taxpayer money, right? So this is all of us funding all these courthouses and all these people to come and handle the due process of 11 million people deported. You would need to hire 41,000. You would need to hire 41,000 more ICE agents. Um, Now on the border, I think they said that there's something like anywhere from like 6 to 20,000 border ICE agents. I couldn't really get a good number. In some states, it says 6 to 8. And then they said between all the offices and everything, like you might have 8,000 Border Patrol agents along the border of Mexico, and that's just agents. But then all the office workers behind it come out to more like 40,000. So, um, however you want to look at that, we would need to then almost at least double our current workforce for Border Patrol and Immigration Customs Enforcement. Again, that's salaries, that's pensions, that's health insurance, that's all these taxpayer things that go into people working for the government. Furthermore, it would result in losing all of that taxes paid, 30% of the construction labor. As I mentioned earlier, how are we going to build all these courthouses and courtrooms when we are trying to deport 30% of the construction labor? It would cost, it would reduce the US GDP anywhere from 4.2 to 6.8%. So a significant hit to our GDP. And of course, all the tax revenues that these people are paying into our system. You would need to arrest people. You would need to detain people. You would need to legally process them. And then what do you do with the removals? I have a typo here on this slide. It should say 11 million. I put 13 million, but 11 is also being conservative. I think some speeches and in some campaign speeches, Donald Trump has said it's 20 million to 25. I'm just going to sit here and call it 11 to 13. Now, again, we would need to hire, in order to carry out all of these arrests and then detain them, you would need to hire somewhere between 220,000 and 400,000 new government employees and law enforcement. There is already a shortage on law enforcement and government employees. And again, we'd have to hire something like 30,000 to 40,000 new law enforcement agents and staff, which would instantly make it the largest law enforcement in federal government. It would separate at least 4 million mixed status families and 8.5 million US citizens with undocumented family members. So, aside from the financial hit to our taxpayer money, all the hiring we'd need to do, how we would do the hiring and the background checks, the building of all of these materials in courtrooms and courthouses, then you have the family side of it. So, it is up to you if you think that this is the fiscally conservative thing to do with our taxpayer money. Now that we've talked about the data, let's hear the stories. So this section, we're going to hear from folks like my walk at Nogales. We'll talk about Jose Antonio, the Border Patrol, Americans along the border, migrant farmers, asylum seekers, district court judges, magistrates, Sierra Club, faith groups, Tohono O'odham Indigenous Reservation, and finally my walk out into the desert with my class in partnership with the No More Deaths humanitarian organization that drops food, water, and medical. So Nogales, this is a rough slideshow. My bad. I'll get better at these. For those who are listening and not watching, there was just too much video movement at once of the town. But as you see, there's the wall, there's the town, there's the bus stop. Nogales lies on the border of Mexico. The border wall actually split the municipality, and parts of Nogales are now on the American side. And because of how it's all set up, our Americans pay, and it has to do with the water underneath the ground, like our water system. American taxpayers are actually paying for Nogales's water source and water treatment. And you see all over, water in partnership with the United States and Mexico, which is weird. The land is primarily owned by one person. There is quite a bit of cartel activity. You could, if you go back far enough, you could see the large mansions. I did not film this for my own, not trying to do that. But they have a different way of how they own land in Mexico, where a lot of the land is actually owned by one person who's probably in connection with the cartel in some way. But the entire city is essentially leased to tenants, so nobody owns anything for themselves. Either one person or a few collective at the very top owns something, and like the whole land for the city. The concept of public school in Mexico is not taxpayer or free. It is subsidized, but if you want to go to school, you still have to pay some sort of fee every year. And so for those who are living in poverty, they primarily prioritize the son being the one who gets paid for to go to education. Again, there is cartel activity, but the locals purport that the activities border trafficking. Some say the cartel actually financially supports local community events, that they do not feel heard or seen or respected or taken care of by their government. And it's the cartels who will help fund funerals or parades or any sort of community event, that it is the cartels who serve as their sort of stability and leadership or protector. Furthermore, with the cartel presence there, it means that other cartel gangs of other if other groups are less likely to come in and mark Nogales as their territory. So the cartels do sort of serve as a sort of respectable militant group that, as long as they're not hurting the locals are going to turn the other way or even secretly respect and appreciate them. Again, we talked earlier in the slide about the Mexican government, or not just Mexican government, but many governments being corrupt. And this is one of the results of high federal corruption and how organized militant groups like cartels wind up coming in for that power vacuum. So here's a video of me at Border Patrol passing through a checkpoint. This is what it looks like. We got stopped. We were a van full of white folk. There was one person of color on our group, but we were all English speaking white American ministers in training coming down to learn more about the complexity of this. Along the border, Border Patrol will have 2 million encounters annually, just talking with people coming in and out. They arrest anywhere from about 44 wanted criminals. So, you run their background or you look at their ID or, whatever. But they arrest 44 folks a day. They perform 118 rescues and significant medical life-saving responses. Now, I know it's easy to be like, all Border Patrol or all cops are bad. That is certainly a conversation that I see happening on the left. We also have to remember that these are our taxpayer people, that there are drugs and human trafficking that are coming across, and we do need national security and protection. We'll get into a little bit about how that protection and power can go sideways, but I do not want to present Border Patrol as inherently bad any more than I want to do that with cops or military. Again, I am an Air Force veteran, and most of these folks are just showing up at work every day trying to collect a paycheck. However, it does attract folks who do have tendencies towards abuse of power and authority. I've put some stats on here about how much money they see every day, or how many processes, what they're doing. I did not realize that aside from drug and human trafficking, but the antiquities market is very strong on the southern border. A lot of folks wanting to go down to Mayan ruins and things like that and sneak a bunch of pottery or go to indigenous lands in Central and South America and then drive it back up. Also, wildlife. A lot of people going down and illegally capturing animals or plants and trying to bring them back into the United States to sell. So 2001 with 9/11 was when we started to see that was the event. And then it took about 3 to 4 years, about 2005, our border was militarized by the congressional spending and presidential acts that came from 9/11. They have a significantly wider range of liberties of policing than standard police. I thought when I got down there it was going to be, a whole bunch of, I don't know, I just assumed it was going to be a bunch of white dudes. And it wound up being around 60 to 70% Border Patrol are of Hispanic descent. There are 73 checkpoints down south. Their jurisdiction is up to 90 miles from the border. Now, funny enough, that's not just 90 miles from the southern border, but they also consider coastlines and the Canadian border as well. So technically, if you live within 90 miles of a coastline or the Canadian or the Mexican border, Border Patrol has jurisdiction in your area. There could be, they do have prior approval for up to 200 miles of jurisdiction in very high need scenarios. So maybe they're chasing someone or something. They cannot directly ask for ID. I said that in my TikTok a while back, but I was corrected by ACLU. They cannot ask for ID, but they can ask and interrogate you on a whole other number of things. Again, some Border Patrol reported being against the wall, some were neutral, some just wanted it to be better, some wanted better technology. Again, it's a whole lot of people down there, a whole lot of opinions. And again, a lot of them are just trying to go to work every day and get their check. There are some Border Patrol that said it was political grandstanding. It does not deter folks from crossing over or cutting through it. And again, that abuse that I talked about yesterday, it really, unfortunately, there are a lot of just neutral people, just going to work. Um, there are, again, the abuse of power. So we do have some Border Patrol agents or some immigrants, migrants reporting like, oh, Border Patrol gave me water and a snack when they found me, or they were very, respectful. Whereas you have some that will just throw people on the ground, um, withhold water, So it ranges. We do have a story from a town called Arivaca, which I'll talk about in a little bit, but I wanted to just talk about Border Patrol and give them their due because kind of like a lot of the rhetoric going around in this country, some people hate them, some people appreciate them, and they're a sizable employed organization, and they are doing and following orders. Some are not, though. Some are taking it way too far. And this one is a great story about that. So, Jose Antonio, he was a 16-year-old boy. There's the video downtown. You see the security camera, the watchtower I'm showing you. That is where Border Patrol was standing. And then where I am standing is where the 16-year-old and his little brother were. It This year was the 20th anniversary of the death of 16-year-old Jose Antonio. He was a Mexican boy shot 10 times by Border Patrol from that watchtower. So again, the wall is on a hill. The wall is 30 feet tall, and the watchtower is another 30 feet tall above it. Um, and he was shot 10 times for throwing rocks. I want to say he's about a block and a half away. So unless this kid has a arm that can launch a rock 200 yards, um, this was a woeful abuse of power. He was shot through. He was dead by the third shot, and the agent climbed down from his watchtower, went through the gate, climbed down the hill, and continued to shoot the kid who was already face down on the ground 7 more times. Um, Again, he was already fatally shot by the third time from the watchtower. Then he climbed down and continued to shoot him 7 more times. The community rallied to raise funds to sue Border Patrol, but the Border Patrol agents are going to be represented by the American government and whatever the American government can pay for lawyers. So they were absolutely no match for the American government. The agent was found not guilty and was transferred to another post. His name and his face are still in murals and memorialized around town. Jose Antonio. So Arivaca is an American town. It is near Tucson, and it has a nearby checkpoint. It is a rural community that, in order to cross or in order to leave your town to come into Tucson, you will have to go through a checkpoint. It was intended to be temporary, but it has been around for 15 years. The high transfer rate of agents within an organization. So Border Patrol actually moves around quite a bit. They get transferred out quite often for a number of reasons. We're not just for need. Again, we do not have the staff to support all of Border Patrol that we need. So they get moved quite a bit around. But what happens because of that is when you are not there and you get transferred, it means there's always new faces of Border Patrol for the local communities to learn and for Border Patrol to learn the faces of the new community. So there's never an opportunity really for trust to be made. It's just Border Patrol and whoever's there and the community. So again, you are an American citizen. You want to go shopping in Tucson. You want to go to work in Tucson. You have to cross a checkpoint with someone who you will never become familiar with. There are reports and videos. There is I will find it and put it in the comments so that I don't waste time. But there is a movie that the Arivaca, the town of Arivaca community members put out of them filming their experience with Border Patrol. Again, these are white Americans filming Border Patrol, their experiences with them. And it's videos of them asking very invasive questions. Again, these are people just going to work and going shopping, breaking windows and pulling American citizens out of the cars for refusing to answer the questions, um, opening the car doors. I mean, like, and there's video footage of all of this. I will find the YouTube. Again, you can look up Aravaka Americans and Border Patrol. There's a movie that they have. I want it's called like I don't remember. I'm sorry. So here we talk to migrant farmers. Um, we met with a Mexican native, Manuel, in Nogales, and he brought us back to his home with his family who made us food. He and his family were generational land owning corn farmers. And when NAFTA hit, they had to sell their lands and come up to the United States in order to work. He went through California, but eventually he left and they settled in Nogales and they welcomed us again into their home. This family now works in the local maquiladoras. Now, maquiladoras are United States American owned factories that are on the border of Mexico. Um, they are horrible conditions. We're talking $12 a day, 12-hour work days, so $1 an hour, um, 5 to 6 days a week. No workers' comp. You will be tested if you are. Men will be tested for drugs. Women will be tested for pregnancy. I do not know why women aren't tested for drugs, but that was just what they were telling us. And then you get tested again 3 months later for pregnancy and drugs. So you at application, you get tested 3 months into your work, you get tested. Now, they will not hire folks over the age of 35, essentially saying, being like, and then you are forced out at 65. So if you are hired before the age of 35, if you were hired at 35, you cannot come back. If you quit and come back, you cannot. So what you have is a lot of people that are essentially just slaves there. They make robotics. They do all they're factory workers. There's makeup and there's also computer technology or robotics or something, medical supplies. I can't remember what was specifically being made in Nogales, but it was some sort of, I know makeup was one and tech manufacturing was another. Again, $12 a day. And they, again, owned by U.S. American companies that are skirting American laws. So here I am with another woman on my on the left. She's another minister, seminarian student that went with me. In the middle is an asylum seeker. She's from El Salvador. Her name is Wendy. She was working at the Border Links, that was the agency, the third-party agency that educated us on all of this. She spoke very little English, but she was learning. She was taking night classes. She has a kid that was born here in the United States. She traveled here from El Salvador to Tijuana. She had a grandfather that was in California that she was trying to reconnect with. She applied for political asylum. El Salvador, Nicaragua, and Guatemala are high conflict countries, and a lot of folks are leaving. Again, they are high conflict countries because of what we did with their governments back in the 80s, but we've kind of passed the history phase now. Let's talk stories. But what you need to know is El Salvador has high conflict, high gangs. She left to seek political asylum here. She missed an appointment, was put on immediate deportation orders. I think at some point, I can't remember when, she had her child, her child is now an American citizen, and she was found and sent back to Mexico 3 months after the birth of her son. So she has a 3-month-old baby in her arms. She's sent to Mexico. She is not from Mexico. She's from El Salvador, sent back, somehow found her way to El Paso and came up that way. Same protocol, applied for political asylum. And this time, instead of working with her family or whatever she did before, she and her husband got connected with immigration activists and organizations to help facilitate the process, because a lot of it is just they don't know. And she is now in Tucson working as a chef. She does embroidery on the side, which I did buy one of her embroidered artwork. And she um, is awaiting political asylum visa. So she is here legally. She is waiting for the next steps in her process. Um, and, it is not simple. I've already taken you through the process of what that would look like. Her story is riddled with patriarchal and bureaucratic abuse. So, I was very thankful and to hear Wendy's story, and I did tear up a few times because stories are powerful. Let's talk about the Sierra Club. We've got about 15 minutes left. All right, so the walls and barriers have already been constructed across more than 650 miles of the US Mexico border. As you see in that photo, that is a photo of deer trying to cross to go find water. They cannot cross the border to go find their water sources. So we do have animals, carcasses dying by the wall because they are trying to cross the wall to go get water or vegetation on the other side. Sierra Club is an environmentalist program, grassroots organization, not program, I'm sorry. And they have been a very consistent force in environmental protections in American history. And they were one of the first real loud dissenters to the wall specifically. The barriers, like I said, the wall, they block wildlife. You can see in the photo what they look like at night, all those lights lit up, which is harming nocturnal wildlife populations. Again, this is out in the desert, so you've got anywhere from bats to jaguars or coyotes or any animal that uses the moon or has nocturnal vision, that the night is when they survive and live, are not being able to have full darkness because of the lights on the border. Now, I put on here that the construction, this is a picture of them building a wall through the mountains. Now, there are parts of the mountains where you just cannot build for, the mountains are too jagged or whatever. But imagine Rocky Mountain National Park, or imagine Glacier or Yellowstone. Imagine anywhere in the United States at Lake Tahoe with mountains that people just build a wall through. You can imagine the outcry, and the folks at the southern border, many folks have that outcry. Why are you building a wall through these majestic lands? Furthermore, the Sonora Desert, that is where we were, is one of the most biodiverse deserts in the world. And that's not just like convenient political rhetoric for the environmentalists down there, but that's real. That Sonora Desert is um, the wild. There are some wildlife and some Florida fauna, and even geological, rocks and features out in the Sonora Desert that are not found anywhere else in the world. So the Sierra Club is especially sensitive to the wall construction. In order to build the wall, as I said, government overreach and spending shot up after 9/11. And since 9/11, there have been almost 50 acts, uh, ranging from Clean Water Act, Clean Air Act, Safe Drinking, Wild Horse and Burro, National Trail System. I've shown all the acts that I could find. These are all the acts, Migratory Board Conservation Act. These have all been waived so that the construction of the border wall can be built. Um, Wilderness Act, Coastal Zone. Archaeological and Historic Preservation Act, Antiquities Act. There have been, like I said, almost 50 protection and conservation acts that have been waived in order to build this wall. Now, faith groups. We've talked a bit about different groups. Faith groups are a major part. Catholic Charities is very big down there. Many folks coming up from Central and South America are coming up and will immediately gravitate towards Catholic churches and Catholic nonprofits. Another one that is involved is Southside Presbyterian Church, and they partner with migrant worker advocacy groups, and they feed breakfast to migrant workers Mondays and Fridays and have been doing so for 30 years. They do welcome faith groups to come and help serve these meals so that you can sit down and listen to their stories. Um, Furthermore, because of their work with migrant worker advocacy groups, we hear or got to learn a lot about the abuse and wage theft of migrant farmers at the hands of American corporations. Migrants, regardless of status, are entitled to U.S. labor rights to protect them and to prevent employers from exclusively exploiting and employing non-Americans. So migrants are entitled to many U.S. labor rights. There are some exceptions, as I mentioned before, but at least wages are concerned. I believe everybody must pay for the same labor, regardless of status of the person performing the labor. That is up for controversy, though, I do want to say. Tohono O'odham. Now, this is the Native American folk. Here I am walking around on their lands. I'm in their museum. The Tohono O'odham are a Native American people of the Sonoran Desert, residing primarily in the U.S. state of Arizona and the North Mexican state of Sonora. Their land, their reservation, is split by the border. To travel to the other side for ceremony or general purpose, they must interact with Border Patrol and provide documentation. There are reports of Border Patrol harassment and prevention of passageway, meaning you could be going to the other side for a ceremony and Border Patrol doesn't allow you for whatever reason. It could be because you don't have the right papers. It could be just because you met a jerk Border Patrol agent that day. Now, it is significant, or it is notable that the Tohono O'odham, again, these are the indigenous people that were here before the United States. Many were here before Mexico. These were people that are now embroiled in a very controversial border crisis, split by the border, and they are their own nation, and now they are embroiled in the politics of nations that they're not even trying to be a part of. So again, giving voice to the Tohono O'odham and their care of the desert Sonoran homelands that they've been living on for centuries. Now we are coming close to the end. I'm going to take you through the desert walk. The Desert Walk is a nonprofit that it is No More Deaths facilitates these desert walks. They are a nonprofit that ferries water and canned goods and medical to a designated drop site. It is frequented by local humanitarian organizations. When we arrived, the food and water from the week before was empty, meaning that they are being used by real people. And it was very humbling to put water and Gatorade and, canned goods and some, you can also put clothing and first aid. That does count. We did not. We just did water and canned goods. We hiked 1.5 miles. It was exposed, as you see in that top left corner, the very, very little shade, on unstable terrain surrounded by very poisonous, spiky fauna and flora, rattlesnakes, particular cacti or vegetation that could be either poisonous or just sharp. Again, what we did, was replenish the empty stock from last week. So this is real, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Now, according to U.S. law, the U.S. can seize humanitarian aid as the form of water, food, clothing, and first aid as humanitarian aid. Anything of basic essentials is considered humanitarian aid. It is illegal to provide transportation, money, or navigational tools such as GPS or map. That is considered aiding and abetting. But if it is food, water, medical, and clothing, that's considered humanitarian aid. Some folks, when I was posting this on my TikTok, got onto me and, you know, how could you provide humanitarian aid to desert crossing migrants? Aren't you just enabling them? And I thought, well, if that's the case, then let's stop providing water, food, clothing, and medical to pedophiles sitting in our prison system. This is what we consider to be humanitarian. This is the basic level of services that we provide any and all people. And if their crime is migrating, then we have a whole bunch of other ethical questions to now consider, right? So I will put my foot down on that one, and I staunchly defend desert walk, and no more deaths, because again, if we are willing to provide food, water, medical, and clothing to even our worst criminals in the United States prison system, then I can certainly make exceptions for these criminals whose crime is seeking a better life and crossing 10 to 15 days across a desert to do so. Now, again, 5 to 15 days, depending on your group size, depending on your agility, depending on other things. So, weather, that's a big one. It is highly exposed. The guides are necessary. As I said, you have to do this with a guide or you will get lost. They're very exploitative, and physically, sexually, and financially abusive. Sun protection, water, proper footwear, that is critical. They are reporting anywhere from 200 to 500 migrant desert deaths annually. And again, these people are at the rock bottom of desperation. There are other methods like taking a bus or flying in and doing it through the visas, but they're costly to the poorest of the poor. These deaths and all of these humanitarian aid organizations going out into the desert started after the wall was built. The wall is what is forcing people to die out in the desert.
Today we provided water and canned goods to desert crossing migrants at the Arizona border of Mexico. We had to cross the checkpoint and drive almost 45 miles away from any major highways or towns, past security watchtowers, in order to start our 1.5-mile hike in the exposed, hot Arizona Sonoran Desert towards a drop site that is used by local humanitarian organizations. We were made aware of how fortunate we were to have proper sun protectant and footwear and adequate water, something the migrants don't have. U.S. law allows for humanitarian aid in the form of food, water, and medical supplies, but prohibits it in the form of money, transportation, and map giving. The Sonoran Desert takes about 10 to 15 days to cross and can be extremely expensive for those who are trying to cross it, and the Coyote guides are notorious for essaying the women that they are carrying across. Immigration is an incredibly complex topic, but has been so dehumanizing. Let's make for a better world. Today we provided water and canned goods to desert crossing migrants at the Arizona border of Mexico. We had to cross the checkpoint and drive almost 45 miles away from any major highways or towns, past security watchtowers, in order to start our 1.5-mile hike in the exposed, hot Arizona Sonoran Desert towards a drop site that is used by local humanitarian organizations. We were made aware of how fortunate we were to have proper sun protectant and footwear and adequate water, something the migrants don't have. U.S. law allows for humanitarian aid in the form of food, water, and medical supplies, but prohibits it in the form of money, transportation, and map giving. The Sonoran
Oh, I did a terrible conclusion, as you say, but that was my conclusion. What I was just telling you is who it was for and thanking them. Now, I am going to go through the slides. I will not verbally speak on them. We're almost at an hour and a half, and I want to keep that under an hour and a half. But for those viewing on YouTube, you can pause and look at these lectures. Furthermore, you can buy, oh, my dog's coming down. You can buy any of, if this resonates with you, my lecture, you can go onto my website and you can download this lecture, my script, marketing materials, and bullet points and marketing blurbs so that you can go into your own community and share this information. Here we have up to 1929. 1954, 1996, 2017. Again, here are the sources that I have used: Customs and Border Enforcement, American Immigration Council. You can read that on the left. I've already said this at the very beginning. And if you want to donate or work with any of these organizations on the right, here are those names that you can follow up to donate, to invite to speak, or again, you can download this on my website, Follow the Leader. Um, it's followtheleader.com, or you can go to my Amazon storefront and buy the books that I have used as to help inform this lecture, including a book written by a Border Patrol agent. My name is Lee. I am with Follow the Leader, and we are trying to educate and inform folks at a digital level through YouTube and podcasts, as well as give you the lectures and material you need to go back into your communities for about the cost of a cup of coffee. And let's do this. Let's make for a better world, folks.